The American Red Cross is a name for some of our neighbors. More than 1.5 million volunteers around the country who can help us through an emergency when we need them.
Hello, I'm Rebecca Richards of the American Red Cross. Welcome to Your Red Cross in Action. In past programs, each time we've talked about the dangers of fire, we've talked about smoking, because year after year, the leading cause of civilian fire deaths is smoking materials. We've cautioned you smokers to make sure that your cigarette or cigar is properly and fully extinguished. We've told you never to smoke in bed, never to smoke after taking medication that makes you drowsy, and never to smoke when medical oxygen is in use. Today our message is a bit more inclusive. We're telling you never to smoke. And we're aiming our message not only at current smokers, but especially at younger potential smokers, those who are considering lighting up because it looks cool. Today we'll be discussing the health issues of smoking. We're particularly pleased to have back with us Joseph Rolanitis, Public Health Affairs Specialist with the United States Food and Drug Administration. Welcome back.
It's great to be here, Rebecca.
All right, so let's start off with a couple of questions and background information about the FDA. So what is the FDA's involvement with tobacco regulation?
Well, let me tell you right now, we really endorse the Red Cross's approach to not smoking. That's the basic underlining factor here. We have been historically involved in attempting to regulate tobacco and now successfully returning to that mission in the year 2010. Back in the 1990s, we had a very, very progressive commissioner by the name of David Kessler. Kessler was a lawyer. He was commissioner of the FDA, and he was also a pediatrician. He had young children. When he came into the FDA in 1990, Rebecca, he had several things that he wanted to accomplish, and one of them was tobacco regulation, keeping tobacco products away from young people. Back in 1994, midway through Kessler's term, we had about 50 million smokers in the country, 50 million. Say 5 or 6 years later, in 2004, we had some 70 million people. So Kessler looked at the problem of smoking, looked at the impact on American youth and Americans in general, and realized something had to be done about it. At the same time, in the 1970s and 1980s, the 7 major tobacco companies were doing interesting things with nicotine content in tobacco products. They were enhancing it. They were developing strains of nicotine that would really hook young people, hook all Americans on the need to have nicotine, to have tobacco products, and to smoke. Of course, this was an economic thing to them, and they were surely less ingenuous. They were disingenuous about representing their products. So that was a major concern, and you had several individuals step forward, thankfully, who worked for the tobacco companies in research and development, in marketing, scientific disciplines and such. And they contacted the regulatory agencies, the federal government, FDA, and indicated this was going on. There was really a need to look closely at the manipulation of nicotine in tobacco. Kessler took that with his staff, took it under advisement, looked at it real closely. Kessler came on in 1990 to the FDA. And by 1995, he had put together a justification under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act that FDA had a regulatory responsibility, or could have regulatory responsibility over tobacco regulation. With that in place, we didn't need any more existing laws. We had the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act to work on. We looked at the tobacco product as a medical device, a delivery system for nicotine, which, as we all know, is a drug. Okay, with that in mind, Kessler went forward, and from 1996 until 1999, the FDA was deeply involved in regulating the sale and distribution and marketing of tobacco products to kids, young people, and adults, as also and looked at this as being a pediatric problem. I mean, you'd have young people, even today, you have 1,000 young people a day getting hooked on tobacco products.
Wow.
1,000. The tobacco industry today spends about $12 billion, Rebecca, marketing yearly their products. and at the, at the time that Kessler was in power with the FDA, they were spending a lot of money there too. They had a lot of senatorial support, a lot of support in other government agencies, a lot of support by industry, and they came head to head with us in the court to try to prevent the Food and Drug Administration from regulating tobacco distribution and sale. It was a major concern. I'll tell you, it was a lively time in FDA's history. We had 3 years of tobacco regulation. We worked with the states. We contracted out to do control buys and so forth and so on, and really had a good handle on, we thought, preventing young people from smoking. Education was part of it, working with the retailers on educating them about sales, cutting back on certain marketing gimmicks. Joe Camel was big back then. Joe Camel went away in 1997. However, the major tobacco companies challenged us in court, in the courts in North Carolina. They had some interesting senatorial backing. 32 senators in the Congress at that time, in the mid-1990s, did not support the FDA's involvement in regulating tobacco. It's an interesting perspective on how they viewed protecting young people and protecting the American consumer. But that was the case, that was the reality, and that was the way it was. We dealt with the major tobacco companies in court relatively successfully. We won the first round in 1997, Kessler and the FDA. Later on that year, our court decision was overthrown and thrown out. The decision of the FDA versus the major tobacco companies went all the way up to the Supreme Court. Now, when you go that far up, it's a major issue. Here you have regulatory government stepping in and trying to protect the young folks, and these are really, it's a heroic action, trying to protect the young people in the country, and you have big industry, opposing them. In 1999, I do believe it was, the Supreme Court ruled that the FDA did not have regulatory power over enforcing, sale and who could buy tobacco products under the age of 18. Did not. As a result, we had to discontinue our operations in tobacco regulation and sort of cease and desist instantly. I was in my office tonight that notice came down via email. Everything stopped. We had hundreds of FDA people involved, literally hundreds of retail stores doing controlled buys, young people out there working for us, going in and seeing if retailers would sell them tobacco products as a test situation to enforce our control and our regulation over sales of tobacco products. Stopped instantly. 1 minute you're regulating tobacco products, the next minute your whole infrastructure goes away and you don't.
Oh, goodness.
Lots of money, lots of hours, lots of hope, and we hoped lots of health promotion for people in this country just stopped way back when. So that was then. This is now. In 2009, President Obama signed the Tobacco Control Act, the Family Smoking Prevention and Tobacco Control Act, which has gone into effect basically this year. Now we're back. We're back.
Yes.
We're back on the scene. We're back doing what we do best. Basically, it allows the FDA, under the Tobacco Control Act, the obligation to control the marketing, distribution, and sale of tobacco products. Okay, and it restricts sale of tobacco products and smokeless tobacco to people under the age of 18 years of age. So that's a big, major thing. If you look at the impact of tobacco use in this country, it's dramatic, Rebecca. It's truly dramatic. Some 400,000 people die every year from tobacco-related use, and whether it's in a fire, which is a major concern, fire caused by smoking, which I know is a Red Cross particular impact and concern, or whether it's by health-related problems that come from using tobacco products. We get about 1,000 people still every day getting hooked on tobacco use. That's dramatic and it's devastating. You lose about $193 billion. Put a dollar and cent value on it and it gets really, really interesting. $193 billion a year in this country through medical expenses and loss of productivity by the use of tobacco products. It's a major concern. It's an epidemic. It's as real as the obesity epidemic and so forth. Tobacco use is a real major concern. So the new laws under the Tobacco Control Act will limit terms like light, smooth, and these descriptive terms in tobacco. Back last October, almost a year ago, flavored tobacco products were banned. So they're gone away. They've gone away. availability of the product is severely limited to young people. There are no more over-the-counter sales in cigarette machines. It's the existing act limits small packages in single cigarette sales, especially to young people. There is a agreement in working with the states and the retail people in the states to really control and educate retailers. Once again, which we did back in the 1990s, some 12 or so years ago, to educate retailers about selling to young people. I mean, the impact is dramatic. The ramifications financially are just unacceptable. The numbers of deaths every year can't stand. And there's really a need to really, put a harness on that and control. Not to take tobacco away, because adults can make a decision, but you don't want to, you don't want a generation of young people to get hooked on tobacco use and suffer the consequences that come with it. That's your historical perspective.
All right, well, thank you. So why has the FDA been so involved with controlling who has access to tobacco?
Well, that's a good question. Well, once again, it's looking at a generation of young people reaching adulthood. If we allow 1,000 or so individuals to start smoking every day, we're going to dramatically shorten the lifespan of those people. In fact, there have been many statistical reports out, and on the average, and I wrote it down before the show kicked off, we expect that the average lifespan for a tobacco user to decrease by about 7 years. That's a lot. I mean, people will hopefully live longer as the country matures, but I mean, if you have 85 years of life and you lose 7 because of tobacco use, you're back to like 1915 or 1950 age group in longevity studies. So we really want to stop that. There's just a need to make people aware of the financial health impact of tobacco use. So that's where that comes to fruition.
Okay. Is there any major health concern specifically that you can address here from tobacco use?
Well, there's a whole list of tobacco-related diseases. Emphysema, and compromise of your lung system is always part and parcel of it. The fact that just the simple fact that people, when they smoke, will inhibit their ability to be physically active. Okay, you're definitely going to cut into that. People will not be anywhere near as physically active as they are. So that's a compromised situation. Those, I think, would be your, and related heart disease, and of course, cancer. Cancer is no longer a death sentence. There are medications and treatments out there that definitely deal effectively with prolonging people's life and treating them if they've had a cancerous condition. But it's a proven fact that use of tobacco products for anybody, adult or a child, whatever the case might be, definitely enhances their possibility of getting cancer. It's cause and effect. It is related. So that's another big concern. Cancer is a major concern. So emphysema, cancer, the just plain loss, Rebecca, of quality of life is really a reason that gets the FDA motivated and other regulatory agencies, state and federal, to work against abuse of cigarette products. Smokeless tobacco is included in that as well.
All right. Well, now we're going to take a break for a moment to go to a short video on smoking and fire safety.
Fires. You've heard about the deadliness of smoke and fires and how to escape. But what causes the fire in the first place? How do we prevent them? To prevent fires, we have to change how we think about fires. First, ask yourself, what caused this fire? Did the burning walls catch the ceiling of this room on fire? Well, yeah, but we want to get to the true source. Was it the burning bed that ignited the wall? Or the box that caught the bed on fire? Maybe it was the lit cigarette inside the box. But a flame had to light the cigarette. Surely you can see where this is going. All of these things helped the fire spread, but none of them caused it. The fact is, the student who lit the match is the one who lit the fire. Do you see? The fire began long before it was on anyone's mind. On the match is a fire. It is transferred to the cigarette. The cigarette is now on fire, and it is under control. Your control. We start controlled fires all the time, but we take them for granted. We take for granted the power of the fire we may be holding in our hand. Think about it. You hold the power of life and death when you light a candle or a cigarette. Respect that. It's true. The only thing that prevents you from causing the devastation that comes from a fire is you. You must choose to prevent fires. They don't prevent themselves. No one ever lit a candle and thought, I'm going to put this next to a curtain so it burns down my whole house, even though it happens. However, people can think, I'm going to clear off this table so the candle won't catch anything on fire. You see? You must be actively aware of your potential dangers and prevent them. Actively prevent them. Here's a couple of quick tips. Your first goal, which guides all other action, is to control the fire or heat source you have created. Think of it as that living thing that wants to escape, and just pay attention to it. It's like having a pet, your own personal pet fire that can easily escape your control. Never leave a flame behind. Don't let it out of your sight. If you do leave the room, put the flame out. Think about how you will replace everything you own. Think about what you can't replace. Your friends, your family. Keep candles and incense in a clean, uncluttered area away from combustible materials. Empty space is the cage of your pet fire. Keep it away from things that can burn, or things that may be blown or knocked too close. Cigarettes are the same way. Don't throw a cigarette that has been lit in a trash can. Even smashing the tip before throwing it away doesn't put it out. It can continue to smolder for hours and cause a fire. This is the ultimate party foul. As long as your cigarette, your fire, has heat, it's still your fire, even if you've thrown it away. Use an ashtray, a real one, or run it under some water to douse the heat. Keep it under control.
Welcome back. So, Joe, what are some of the recent regulations that have gone into place? Can you tell us about them and what kind of effect they've had so far?
Sure. Well, Rebecca, under the Tobacco Control Act, which went into effect in June of this year, June of 2010, we basically have 4 bullet point goals that we're looking at. And one, of course, is to prevent youth from using tobacco. Okay, don't want young people to get hooked at all at any age. We don't want young people using tobacco at all. Education will help a lot. Also, we want to help adults work into mechanisms that will help them quit. You know, I mean, there are patches, there are pills, there is therapy, and there's a lot of ways for addicted adults to become unaddicted and stop using tobacco products. That's important. And also, it's really important to make sure the public understands the contents of tobacco and the consequences of using it. You know, long-range education on all levels to all groups. You know, coming on this program is a great thing for the FDA because we get a message out to people and we sort of drive home the problem of smoking and the negative consequences. And we've been always developing, Rebecca, a scientifically based understanding of the regulations and how they impact on people, and how tobacco-related diseases, cause disability and death, and all the negative ramifications. So if you look at the Tobacco Control Act, those are the 4 major premises that we're implementing. It's a major concern. We're working with retailers statewide, throughout the New England district, and throughout the nation to make sure young people are not involved in tobacco use. It's a long slug. It really is. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of coordination, and a lot of outreach. Really. So that's basically the premise that we're approaching. And when we have regulatory control over marketing, distribution, and sales of tobacco products, we think this time around will be particularly successful in driving the point home. We hope. We're optimistic.
That kind of is going off of my next question, which is, the FDA's record with regard to regulating tobacco products to young people hasn't been so great. Do you expect the most recent efforts to be any more successful?
Well, that's a great question, and Boy, I'm optimistic. I mean, having been deeply involved as a younger member of the agency back in the 1990s, it was a great time because it was a time of optimism. It was a great cause. I believed in it. Kessler believed in it. The agency believed in it. And it was a bit of a crusade, sort of a healthcare crusade. Do I think we'll do better this year or this time around? I really think so. I think the current administration is dedicated to this. The major tobacco companies, Rebecca, don't have the pull and the power they used to have. They still make a lot of money. They still voice sincerity. Sometimes I'm skeptical about that. But they don't have the popular support that they used to. I think people are becoming more health conscious. I mean, if you look at the workout programs, the sports programs, the